So basically, the title of this talk is An Unwatched Pot Never Boils. The title doesn't really make sense, okay? It's just to get you guys thinking. Obviously, the actual phrase is a watched pot never boils. But I want us to be looking at this metaphor and thinking about what happens when we're looking at a subject and what happens when we're looking away from it, and the possible dangers and things that can arise, but also the benefits that can happen. Obviously, cannabis is a hot topic. Dave said my background's in neuroscience. I've studied at Sussex, and basically, since then I've moved into the field of pharmacy, and basically medical cannabis has been kicking off. So I like this picture just because you can't really see, but this is hemp grown in the UK. It's actually a plant from Hempin's farm, which has recently been demolished, so that's a bit sad, but it's a very beautiful plant, and there's a lot to be said about the UK hemp industry rather than what's happening in the medical cannabis space with a lot of the big companies coming over from places like Canada, but that's a whole other talk. Quickly, a tangential point which I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, which is this talk is dedicated to somebody I met at Breaking Convention 2 years ago. This guy, Dr. Simon Jones. He actually was a medical cannabis farmer in Canada on a commercial scale for 10 years, growing in warehouses with 10,000 plants in each of the warehouses, and then realized, I want to be growing this cannabis outdoors. And so he moved to Jamaica, where he started growing medical cannabis and working for the government there. And he was going through a tough time there, and he submitted an essay to Breaking Convention and won, 500 quid or something like that, which was enough to get his flight back here to the UK, where I then became friends with him. And he became a kind of cannabis mentor of mine in terms of, learning about the plant, growing the plant, all that jazz. Unfortunately, he died of cancer. He died of lung cancer in the UK. It was about a year ago. And he thought he didn't have very long to live, but he was looking for medical cannabis in the UK, and he couldn't get it. He died within a month of telling me that he had cancer, and there was just something fucked up and ironic about the fact that this is somebody who's grown such a massive quantity of medical grade cannabis, but he couldn't access it himself here in the UK. And if you're into anthropology and Jamaican medical cannabis, I recommend you check him out. He's got some really interesting papers on what's been going on there. So, the aims of this talk are to talk a bit about applied cannabis science, okay? So I'm going to be specifically talking about labeling accuracy of cannabis products. And then I'm also going to talk about the uses of them. And obviously I'm going to be talking about hemp and CBD products, but it can be applied to everything. And I also, so you've got crystals, cannabinoids, all sorts of compounds, paste extracts, flowers, CBD, oils, more crude extracts. A lot of the fundamental principles of what I'm going to be talking about can be applied to all herbal medicines in general, okay? So whilst I'm just talking about CBD, I want you to bear in mind the bigger picture. And really, the Seed Sisters gave a fantastic talk. They were talking about things like milk thistle. Those have also got lots of active ingredients that, we need to make sure the labeling is on point, and that really on a fundamental level, it's all about honesty. So, my rationale for this is basically the market's under-investigated. I'm going to, in the interest of time, skip through some of this, but basically there are warning letters from various European institutions, also the FDA, but also the Home Office. But I wanted to highlight 2 key research papers that come from the US. One is this second point over here about the labeling accuracy of THC edibles in medical dispensaries in the US. And this group found that 60% of them were under-labeled for THC content. Okay, so you follow me? So it had more THC than what it said on the label. And I can't remember, I think it was about 25% were over-labeled, okay? That's obviously a problem, and from a European perspective, you know, it worries me, having friends that use medical cannabis to treat epilepsy, that there are these labeling issues under, you know, companies and businesses and enterprises that are using the label of medicine, yet they're not reaching that higher standard, which isn't hard to achieve, that pharmaceutical companies and other people have been carrying out for quite some time, okay? On the CBD point, is basically, they brought 84 CBD products online, okay? So they sourced them off Amazon, off, you know, various different retailers. And this wasn't just CBD oils, this was e-liquids, tinctures. The interesting thing to note, and why I wanted to mention this Bond-Miller 2017 study, is that the e-liquids were the worst category. Most of them didn't contain, you know, what they said to contain. There's another story there about ways in which things can be adulterated or ways in which we can enforce quality. So out of the 84, 36 out of 84 of them contained less CBD than their label claim. So I don't know about you, but I think there's something going on there. This is the same study, and I wanted to paraphrase that finding differently, which is of the 40 CBD oils, so we're not talking about the tinctures, we're not talking about the vape liquids, of the 40 CBD oils, the average label claim was 561.5 milligrams in a 10 ml bottle, but the average test results, and they were very thorough, was approximately 250 milligrams per 10 ml bottle. And what I'm kind of putting forward is this a case of optimism? Is it the case of the glass full glass? No, it's not, exactly. You know, it's no way near. The glass is definitely half full in this instance. And, you know, we can do a lot better in the medical cannabis industry. There are lots of talented people working within this field. And I think we can all raise our standards. I'm going to talk about some research I conducted on labelling accuracy in a moment. I want to briefly mention that one of the factors to consider, and there really should be three circles in this Venn diagram, but which is that cannabis lies at this interface between medicines and health food supplement, but also psychoactive substances. And it's this shifting dynamic borderline. Obviously, there are parts of the cannabis plant which are 100% a food product. You've got the hemp seeds and whatever else. Then you've got things that are very much going to be only under the medical domain, you know, where people are titrating cannabinoids into intravenous solutions for doctors and emergency medics and people to use as cannabis becomes liberated. But that interface is a very difficult area for regulators and for companies to basically, I think the problem arises there. They're confused. They don't know how to advertise. You know, they're worried about whether they're going to be prosecuted or they're doing something wrong. And I think that you know, this is one of the factors that gives rise to the labelling issue. So I'm going to move on to some of my research that I did for my master's, where it was basically two projects, two approaches. On the one side, I did the labelling accuracy, and that was, you know, doing HPLC, NMR, some chemistry in the lab. And on the other side, I also did an online-based survey and asked 1,400 cannabis users about their cannabis use. But I also asked them about hemp and CBD products. And just for the ease of discussion, I said to people, when we talk about hemp and CBD, let's just talk about it as specifically labeled hemp and CBD products. And when we're talking about cannabis, let's talk about drug-type cannabis, okay? On a scientific point, you know, that distinction is neither here nor there, and these debates are covered elsewhere really extensively, so I'm not going to go through it. But when I'm talking about these two things, that's what I'm saying, okay? So I'm going to whiz through some of the results from the survey. The main categories for both pain and, for both cannabis and hemp and CBD were pain, okay? Also sleep, but also mood. Now, I've done this, it would have been really boring if I was showing the percentages and things like that. So this isn't, the scale, I've tried to make it as accurate as possible, but what I realized was mood. The mistake that I made is I didn't delineate mood, i.e. people using drug-type cannabis might be doing it to be intoxicated, but people using hemp and CBD products might be using it as an anxiolytic, okay? But as an overarching theme, the uses of cannabis generally seem to be for similar aspects that lots of other over-the-counter herbal medicines are being used for. Things like valerian, even St. John's wort, stuff like that, it's given for low mood, okay? Then I asked people about the methods of consuming cannabis, and the main method for drug-type cannabis was smoking, eating, vaping, but for hemp and CBD, there was much more sublingual activity going on, basically. That likely reflects, obviously, the actual formulations of the products, rather than these two distinct fields as separate. Because obviously, most CBD products, and vaping is obviously a big category, are being sold in bottles, for sublingual application, and vaping, well, the whole e-cigarette tobacco field has just jumped on that bandwagon, basically. I think there's this whole domain is constantly shifting, and that, with recent reports about cannabis e-cigarettes in the UK being tainted with synthetic cannabinoids as well as toxic byproducts, the consumer behaviors and the consumer choices are likely to be changing. And on top of that, there's CBD and hemp conferences every month or every week. It's bizarre. This is the last thing I'm going to highlight from this survey, and that is the source of cannabis, which is really important when we're talking about the regulatory aspects and the ways of ensuring quality control when you're buying cannabis products. And that, for cannabis, most people reported that they got it off their friends or in person from somebody they only see to buy drugs, a dealer, but I've been told that's politically incorrect to call them a dealer, and that they're now called suppliers. Yeah. So with hemp and CBD products, there's a different story going on. You've got most people in the UK, this also had USA respondents, but most people were buying it from the internet. So when you think about that study I spoke about before, we had 36 out of 84 CBD products that were underlabeled. The way I'd like you guys to think about it, and girls, is what's happening here is it's this trend overall to a doorstep economy, whereby we're buying more products and we're getting them delivered to our door. Amazon, takeaways, everything. And if you go into a shop and you order a pizza and you're a vegetarian and it comes and it's got salami on it, it's not too bad to, you ask the waiter, you return it, you get a new pizza. If you get it delivered to your door and it's the wrong pizza, there's going to be an issue. It's going to be a bit more of a faff, a bit difficult to return it. You might just kind of flick the bits of pepperoni off or whatever it is and eat your pizza. I think that's what's happening a lot with hemp and CBD products is people have so many unmet medical needs, and that's where herbal medicine is coming in. People are desperate. They're ordering these things online, and they're not willing to engage into the discussion and contact the providers, the manufacturers, and the processors. And so my recommendation is always to try and get as close to the source of your cannabis as possible, and to build up good rapport with the suppliers, and also to always, if it's a serious medical condition, you should constantly be monitoring it with a healthcare professional. So This is a picture by a guy called George Weilersall. He's also known as Sassy Blue Panda. He's a great artist and he writes a lot about cannabis and does really beautiful illustrations in The Guardian. But there's lots of common trends and fads that are happening in the cannabis space. And one thing that I get a bit worried about, especially as one of my mentors from the School of Pharmacy has been working in herbal medicine for over 40 years, is he says, while cannabis, it's not special in any way. It's just another medicinal plant, okay? Obviously, and it is coming in, like the other herbal medicines, to meet these unmet medical needs. And so we need to be looking at it in a more honest and open way. And I just liked this picture, so I wanted to show it to you. Another thing is I want to talk about the context that it might lie in. So this is also from the survey, actually, and it was 285 people that told me the top 50 medications that they were co-consuming with medical cannabis. I'm not going to go through it all, but there's loads here. You can see the zone it's operating in, all right? You've got tramadol, you've got SSRIs, there's loads of things there. But what I'm saying is there's lots of research about other herbal medicines coming out that show, things like valerian, they're also replacing a lot of these compounds, and we need to look at them through a more honest lens. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my quality control experiment in the UK, which I did in 2017, in this rather nefarious looking machine called an NMR machine, which is in the basement of the School of Pharmacy. Well, I was just testing hemp and CBD products, okay? I'm only going to be talking about CBD oils today. I also did test the raw plant material. That's a harder conversation. So in my experiment, the results were that 14 out of 32 were equal to or greater than their label claim, but 8 out of 32 were over-labeled. You following me? Yeah? So there was less CBD than the label claimed for it to consist. 10 of them had no claim or label. So, and I purchased all these products myself. A lot of them were purchased in farmers markets and places like that. And, there's nothing on there. There's not even a label claim. So there's obviously some cause for concern there because, I mean, there's just no label at all. You don't know what's in it. So my test that I did in the UK was somewhat better than this US experiment, but the average content was 225 milligrams in a 10 ml bottle, and the average claim was 300 milligrams. It's likely, because this was done in 2017, the situation's a lot worse now. This is a bit like dark side science, but there's so much white labeling of hemp and CBD products going on. The industry has boomed over the past couple of years, so these results, they need to be done again and again. You need to test inter-batch, between batches, also intra-batch, because a lot of the CBD products have got sediments in them and things like that. So, when you're in the lab testing them, you're going to mix it, you're going to shake it up. There's all these kind of issues. So I'm going to skip this slide out just in the interest of time because there's a lot packed in here. But briefly, you've got the grey market, you've got the black market, and you've got this legal market of like pharmaceutical medicines. The point I wanted to make about this is that I think everyone's confused. People have a go at GW Pharmaceuticals, people have a go at all these big, I also mentioned it earlier, but the big corporations, but they're also not sure how to market their products, okay? And I think so are these companies in the grey market, and it's about the conversation. And I think talks like this, it's about shifting the conversation to rather than it being a cure-all and this, that, and the other, to this is another medicine. It's also a health food supplement. Let's go on from that angle. So, in summary, I think there is a way out. I think there is a way, in the UK at least, which we can get good quality CBD products, and I'm surprised nobody's done it yet. Overall, we need more research into cannabis products, not just cannabinoids, terpenes, the alkaloids in them. There's all sorts of interesting compounds there. And also, another point is that cannabis, I think, really offers a prime opportunity to study the social aspects of medicine, medical anthropology, because it really is, I can't remember who said it, but it really is, the people's psychedelic, seeing as we're breaking convention. And so many people, it's such a common intoxicant and such common medicine. So the way out I wanted to bring to your attention, I'm not sure if any of you have heard about it, but this THR scheme, which is a MHRA regulated scheme in the UK for herbal medicines for over-the-counter only, and only for minor medical claims, but no CBD companies have made a THR product yet. I don't know why. I mean, every CBD company I meet, I tell them they should do this. And so I'm sure there are some in the works. I think it does take about a year or two for you to get your THR approval. But what it means, if you get a THR approval, the MHRA will regulate it like any other medicine, like paracetamol, whatever. It can be in a tincture, it can be in a pill, it can be in a blister pack, it doesn't really matter. What they care about is that the quality is okay, that you have Braille on your packaging, okay, so that blind people can, find the medicine and, when they go to the pharmacy or the health food store. And it also means that there's a pharmacovigilant aspect to it. So there's contact details of the suppliers and the producers, and you can report any side effects, and you can go to your pharmacist. It's subscribed to a yellow card scheme, and basically it allows the kind of thing that the Seed Sisters were talking about. It allows us to take note of the adverse side effects, which there are. So my final point is there are 4 important regulatory landscapes, and they're not mutually exclusive. They're all kind of intertwined. So you've got obviously the medical aspect, the recreational aspect, the scientific research. As a scientist working in the lab, you have to do so much paperwork. You have to go through ethics committees that are really kind of, like they're holding your research to a much higher standard than they would anybody else's research. And the 4th thing, which I'd like to bring to your attention, is the real CBD. And that's the Convention on Biodiversity, okay? And that's about the sustainability of cannabis products, okay? I don't think enough people are asking this question yet. I mean, is growing indoors with high-powered lights and shipping it over from Canada, is that, what is the carbon footprint of that? I don't know. Another aspect to that is, people growing it in regions where they do slash and burn on areas of growing it outdoors. There's lots of different considerations to take into account, but again, biodiversity isn't factored into any medicines as far as I'm aware. Like no licensed medicines have to ascribe by sustainable biodiverse laws. Basically, they can harvest a plant until it's nearly threatened to extinction, which they have done with some. One example is Prunus africana, and then the governments will basically say you can't harvest this plant anymore, and then that's when it stops. And a lot of people are left without a medication, and that's obviously a serious issue. Obviously, there's another aspect about sustainability, which is about resistance to crops, resistance to pests. If you have more biodiversity, you're more likely to be resistant to fusarium and wilts that could wipe out commercial grow operations. This is a big issue with cannabis. I know some people are looking at this. So, to end, I Googled a watch pot never boils, and you'd be surprised at how many, there's tens of thousands of like YouTube experiment videos of people staring at pots and then seeing how long it takes to boil, that kind of thing. And it's absolutely bizarre, and it's all men, there's no women doing it. The common theme, in the wrap-up of a lot of these YouTube videos was about not burning down your kitchen, and not burning down your house, and that if you're not watching the pot boil, something can go wrong, and there can be accidents that happen that get in the way of, you ultimately, you're cooking nice food for your family, you want to watch the pot, you don't want to ruin your meal, you want to be able to serve the things that nourish your loved ones. I think that's what we're seeing with cannabis, Let's not turn away from these kind of dark aspects and these labeling accuracy, and let's watch the pot boil, okay? Thank you guys for listening. Another thing I wanted to mention, it's always worth saying, but I am looking for PhD funding, basically. So if anyone knows any sources for money for cannabis research, please let me know. And if you're interested, check out my website. I send out a newsletter of all these labeling accuracy studies and things like that. So thank you very much.